Good morning, everybody, and you're all very welcome to this, the second in MyMind's Spring series of health and wellbeing webinars, which are designed to help us all deal with the added challenges of trying to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Gráinne O'Rourke and I'm Head of Communications here at MyMind, and I'm delighted to be involved in this webinar series and to see so many of you giving up your time this morning to participate. Now, I know Vincent has a really nice presentation lined up for us, and he's going to be doing a really useful exercise at the very end of the presentation. But before we get to Vincent, I'm just going to cover a couple of little housekeeping things. So the first is to remind you that even though we've all been dealing with the technology for ages, things unfortunately can still go wrong. So hopefully they won't, but if they do, please bear with us. The second thing then is to say that the event is being recorded and will be available in case you miss any of it or you want to revisit some of it on our YouTube channel from early next week. And then the other thing to mention is that we have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And as I always say at these things, there's no such thing as stupid questions. So please, if something occurs to you as you're watching the presentation, please do put it into the Q&A box and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can at the very end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Vincent to kick us off this morning. Good morning, Vincent.
Yeah, thanks, Gráinne, and good morning to everyone. I just want to extend a really warm welcome to everyone who's made time to come along today. So I hope everyone finds this an interesting topic. So it's dealing with emotional triggers. So what are we going to be looking at today? We're going to be understanding this experience of feeling triggered. We're all human, we're all people. I think we can all relate to this. So it's a very familiar feeling, but sometimes maybe there's a lot we can learn about what that's really about for us. So then, of course, it's going to be a very practical question, like, what do I do about it? Like, I mean, okay, I know a little bit more about it, but like, how can I maybe, handle it better or, kind of be a little bit more skillful, kind of have more options. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to turn to a nurturing exercise after, like what to do after being triggered, because there's often a lot of raw feelings and upset and stress and so forth after being triggered. So this is a nice, gentle exercise to really calm oneself down and nurture oneself and investigate what was that about, that being triggered, and what we needed. So that'll be at the end. And as Gráinne said, we'll have some questions and answers. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. So I just wanted to kind of give an organizing idea for the webinar that, this is really to keep in mind, this is about taking better care of yourself emotionally. It's almost lunchtime. It's a cold, wintry day here, and I'm sure everyone's going to go and have something nice to eat. After this, you're going to take care of your appetite, your body. So this is about taking care of your mind and your emotions. So this is something to kind of help you orientate yourself to the webinar with today. And just to say, this is just a very brief introduction. It's a big topic. It's going to be pretty practical. There's going to be, we could spend hours on this, but this is quite a short introduction. So just to bear that in mind. So we're going to start off by trying to understand what this is, this feeling of being triggered. So like, it's a very familiar feeling. I don't even think I need to even go into it that much in a way in terms of the raw experience, because we have really familiar expressions in our language, like someone pushed my buttons, when he said that or she said that, that really hit a nerve for me. I got really upset when that driver pulled out in front of me, or somebody didn't wear a mask in a shop. I just heard a friend of mine talking about that recently. And of course, maybe blew a fuse, like when they said that thing that really, they know kind of I'm sensitive about, maybe, this kind of, I blew a fuse, like I kind of lost my temper, got frustrated, or maybe just, shut down. So these are really familiar experiences for all of us. So I suppose, just inviting us all here today to feel into our humanity here. We're all here together, kind of looking at this and, just to be self-compassionate about this. This is very human, this experience. So looking at it a bit more closely then, it's really about a stimulus response experience. So we see here the lady on the right in the picture looks like she maybe doesn't realize the cooker switched on. So she touches the ring, and that's the stimulus, is the heat, the burning of the ring, and her response. You see, it's immediate, it's big. She gets a shock. She's saying, ouch. Maybe she's cursing. She could be getting angry. She might be getting angry with herself. She might feel embarrassed. So like just going through this, like it's an unexpected experience often. It's kind of some expectation is violated often. We expect safety or regard or to be kind of, included in some way, or for the situation to be okay. And then we get a shock. The strong emotions, it looks like, she's obviously kind of, probably perhaps frightened, upset, at the very least, perhaps annoyed, perhaps with herself, be annoyed with the cooker. This is the thing. I've got a little star here beside signals and need. And I think I really want to draw everyone's attention to this point, that if we look at a situation where we get triggered, there's always a need that's underneath the response. So there's always something that we need, like emotionally in that moment, that we're not getting. So let's look at that a bit more closely. So feeling triggered always involves some need, like it could be to be included, accepted, understood, to feel safe, to feel like our feelings matter. And I suppose I make the word feel there in italics because I want to emphasize that it's not so much about, the reality of the situation, perhaps, or all the details, or even what's intended by other people or the situation. It's how we feel subjectively in that moment is kind of what's driving the emotion, what's driving the big response. We feel like we're not included, and we feel like we're not accepted. So it's kind of a raw reaction, and it's kind of unprocessed in a way if you think about it like that. So a little bit of Shakespeare here. I think, Shakespeare, one of the great experts on human nature, past his prologue. I love this quote. The past frames our experience. So like, if we had, say difficult times in groups, maybe school wasn't so easy. There was things that happened in our family. This can really frame how we approach the world. And then we can be quite sensitive then to maybe needs not getting met in the present that weren't also met in the past. So I'll just say here, our needs are imperfectly met throughout our lives because we live in an imperfect world. We all had imperfect childhoods. Nobody had, kind of optimum nurturance. At least I've never met any real person who did have a perfect childhood. So not having our feels met, it's something we've experienced at different levels throughout our lives. We all know this experience, and it brings us into an uncomfortable, painful state in our body and mind. And I like this quote at the end as well. If you prick us, do not bleed. This is just our common humanity. We just all are sensitive beings, when you get down to it. So some people are more sensitive than others, but ultimately we can all be hurt and have a need for sensitivity, concern, regard, safety. It's just part of the deal of being human. So I really struggled here to kind of condense a lot of brain science, and I didn't want to befuddle everyone's minds on a Thursday morning with too much science. But this is something that we've really discovered, through psychology over the last 100 years, that we tend to approach situations from a feeling point of view first, and then we refine that with thinking afterwards. So this is the idea of the feeling brain and the thinking brain. The feeling brain, we walk into a room and we have an immediate reaction. Maybe we see somebody we know and we think, oh, wow, there's so-and-so, really great to see them. And then, of course, we might walk into a room and see an old teacher that we didn't get on with, and we have an immediate reaction to that person. So that's that's felt in the body. It's very feeling based if you think about it. It's a real reaction. It's like, oh, I don't like them, or, or it could be like, oh, I don't know, do I feel safe now? Or, I don't know where I stand with this person or this group, or maybe if there's something happening with somebody who's maybe doing something that we consider reckless, like in terms of safety around COVID, not washing hands or, wearing a mask or something like that, that all this kind of creates these kind of immediate reactions. And see, the great thing about us is we also have a thinking brain. So thinking brain allows us to deliberate and to slow down, kind of gather more information and take perspectives. So we can kind of sort of, put ourselves in the other person's shoes and kind of wonder about, okay, what's going on for them? am I getting the full picture here? So we are always refining and processing our kind of felt sense experiences. And so the two parts of us kind of work together. It's not that one's right and the other one's wrong. I don't want to kind of give the feeling side of us like kind of bum rap here. It's like we need our intuitions. It's important that we have gut reactions. They really do help us to navigate the world, but they're never the full picture. It's like it's never the full story. There's always more, kind of exploration we can do. We can be curious. We can slow down, and then we can kind of go back and we have a kind of a slightly bigger kind of like felt sense experience, maybe a more safe one, because ultimately we do want to be in our feeling body. We don't want to be just in our logical brain. But it's kind of like, how do we move out of a kind of a felt sense of threat or upset or hurt into a more felt sense of, oh, actually, this is okay, or I feel kind of more comfortable or safe, or even like, oh, I think I know where that person's coming from. Actually, they're being triggered by something, or, they're kind of having a bad day. So now I can put that in context, and that's not as threatening, or that's not as difficult. And of course, that's easier said than done. So, it takes a little bit of knowledge, awareness, and practice to kind of begin to approach situations more and more like this. Particularly, I mean, look, we're in COVID times, and all of us are probably more tired than we would be, usually. There's kind of an anxiety there, chronic uncertainty. So that can make us all more in a feeling state, which is kind of more off, more sensitive, more anxious, more on guard, shall we say. And that can make our threshold for tipping into even more of that kind of much closer to the surface. So it might take less for us to kind of fly off the handle, or to kind of, feel kind of anxious because of the kind of the alert that, we're all kind of experiencing with the pandemic. And there's a thinking in that, if you follow me, that it's kind of a like, oh, I can build that in. If I think about it, we're all under kind of extra pressure now, and people are tired working from home. Schools are closed. We can kind of make allowances for ourselves and others that kind of refine the kind of feeling of, God, this is really difficult, or everyone seems like a bit on edge, or I feel on edge, or whatever. So you see, I suppose like what I'm trying to really convey here is that it's this kind of working, kind of a flow and a kind of interweave between feeling and thinking that can kind of help us to navigate in a way that's not as reactive or not as raw, that we can kind of like, refine the kind of the more, intense primitive impulses with, okay, so why am I feeling anxious, or why am I feeling annoyed, or why am I feeling, what's going on that might actually be kind of making me prone to this even. So here, like when we feel like we can't get our needs met, we can have big reactions. So again, really want to emphasize the importance of needs. If we feel like, we need to feel safe, or safety is really, prominent in our minds, and that's not happening. Something's happening that's kind of threatening that, then that's going to create big reactions in us, in our felt sense. And we're going to be looking for ways to cope, because, when we have those kind of signals in our bodies and our minds that, I'm not safe, I'm not, I'm not included, I'm not regarded, whatever the trigger is for any of us at any time, it can be so many different things. We're going to probably express symptoms. We're going to have reactions that, as a way to try and cope. So if we're not able to kind of, explore it and refine it in the way I was talking about, and kind of working with the thinking and feeling sides, both sides. So what are we talking about with symptoms? So when we feel triggered, we can act out. We can get angry, feel angry. We can be passive aggressive. It's not always expressed. Sometimes it's kind of passive aggressive anger. We might storm off, or we might kind of withdraw. And, there may be a little bit more of a recklessness, say something kind of that's kind of off the cuff, that might actually just make the situation worse. We might feel embarrassed afterwards. And at the more extreme end of this spectrum, it can really fuel addictions and self-harm. And then acting in it's the other way it can go. We can kind of end up angry with ourselves, shutting down with shame, feeling defeated, depressed. This is where the person on the outside might look like they're fine, but or they might seem a bit quiet, or we might seem a bit quiet to an outsider, but actually there's a lot of internal pain and shame and feeling helpless, which can also be a consequence of being triggered. So this is Stephen Porges. He's a really interesting researcher on the nervous system, and he says, or he paraphrase his science. We all want to feel safe, physically and personally inside our own bodies. And when we feel threatened, we go into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So this is again kind of the symptoms of being triggered and not being able to kind of get back to that feeling of safety interpersonally and inside our own bodies that can kind of be very upsetting for us. So I think what I've discovered, and I think what psychotherapy is showing us more and more, is symptoms ease and melt away naturally with time when we find better ways to meet our needs. So we're going to start moving into that now in a moment. So to do that, we need curiosity, patience, compassion, and support. So now I'd just like to invite everyone to kind of take a moment to think of a time recently when you felt a bit triggered. Maybe don't pick something too intense, and just, I'm going to give you all just a minute there to maybe, cast your mind around. You might already have something in mind coming to the webinar. A time when you felt triggered, just think about that. Just hold that in awareness as we move into part 2. So what can I do when I feel triggered? So I was thinking about this, how to give people a practical sort of set of tools or even like one tool to kind of, deal with this difficult kind of experience. Because when we're triggered, it's hard to think. I think we can all, everything kind of speeds up. It's often an intense, upsetting kind of sense of self. Something's not okay. And there can be a real urge to act, to kind of resolve the situation, or we may shut down. So I was thinking, would there be a memory tool that could help? Like something that when it's intense and we need something that we can kind of access kind of easily, what might help with being triggered? So I thought of a song actually. And, so the song is a safe cross code. And I was talking to Grania about this earlier, that this is actually being re-recorded just a couple of years ago. But back in the 70s and 80s, this was something that appeared on Irish television. For any of the international participants here today, this is something that, some of us grew up with watching this song. And I think the song is very interesting because it names certain things. It's about how to cross the road safely when you're a child. And it's a song that's kind of, when if you were growing up in Ireland in the 70s and 80s, you could kind of almost hear it in your head. And it reminds you about certain things. And we're going to look at that, listen to the song and talk about the words in the song that can apply to being triggered. So we're going to kind of take this song and apply it to being triggered. We're just going to listen to the song now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, take off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, take off.
Remember, look for a safe place. 2, don't hurry, stop and wait. 3, look all around and listen before you cross the road. Remember, 4, let all the traffic past you. 5, then walking straight across you. 6, keep walking. That's the safe cross code.
Okay, so that's a little song that we had back in the 70s and 80s, and it's a new version around now. Again, new video. Brendan Grace, I think, sang it. Still can. So, these are the lyrics. The song goes look for a safe place. So let's say, you're being triggered. Someone says or does something. It could even just be a look, or it could be a word or a phrase, or it could be something that someone's done, or it could even be a memory, or it could be just waking up after a bad dream. So look for a safe place. So safety is often kind of something that's being kind of threatened or undermined. So what would help to make you feel safe? I was thinking about this, and I was thinking the really obvious ones are, your breath, be one. So just to slow down and to notice your breath and notice I'm breathing, and that's all I need to do right now is to breathe. And usually 99% of the time, you don't have to do anything immediately when you're being triggered. Now, obviously, if it's a dangerous situation, you have to take immediate action. But that's thankfully rare enough. It does happen still in our world, but most of the time it's something that you can kind of take a moment or a while to kind of regulate yourself, regulate your emotions. So your safe place could be, in your breath, in your body, particularly in the legs, I would say, like grounding down, maybe feeling your feet, and just remind yourself, actually, I'm breathing, I'm feeling my feet. So this, and nothing physically bad has happened to me right now. I think that's good to kind of remind oneself that actually, in a kind of a basic physical sense, there is safety, unless, of course, if there is a real threat and you have to take immediate action. So that's important to note. Point two is don't hurry, stop and wait. So, again, just hang on. You're feeling triggered. You're absolutely 100% human. And, so, just to slow down. I think slowing down and stopping to wait and see what's happening inside of me is really, really valuable. Just to as the next line, number 3, look all around and listen. So look around inside yourself, like just what's happening. Am I getting really annoyed? Am I feeling really hurt? Am I feeling really, threatened? Do I feel really, kind of uneasy with this situation? And look around your situation, like what is actually happening? Like who's there, what's actually happening? Listen to what people are saying. This is all part of slowing down. I like number 4 as well. Let all the traffic pass you. I kind of imagine this being the emotions pass you, the feelings and thoughts. So you're having all these really rapid feelings and thoughts. You're triggered. So what would it be like to let them pass you? Like just almost like cars flying by you. Just kind of go, okay, wow, look, there's anger. There's, fear. There's like, there's a thought of, dot, 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 whatever. Just let it like run through you for a little while, maybe a few moments, maybe a few minutes even. Number 5 is then walking straight across. So in the little song, it's about going across the road, but this is about kind of mobilizing yourself, like kind of like maybe breathing a bit more and kind of going, okay, this is maybe the intensity starting to lessen a bit. So what am I going to do? I can start making choices that maybe I need to like take a step back or to go out, get a bit of fresh air, or maybe I need to say something. Maybe I don't need to say something. It could involve different things. Maybe I need to ask a question. And number 6 is keep watching. I think when we get triggered, we become hypervigilant anyway. What I mean by that is we become very, very kind of like, watchful and guarded. And so, it's okay, like a lot, like if you go with that, you kind of go, okay, I'm going to take in even more information. That's kind of getting your thinking brain back online, because often that kind of goes offline a bit with being triggered. We're more in our feeling self. So if you actually do keep watching, you do kind of like observe, you just take in more information and even like language that, even if you kind of come up with words like, oh, so this is what they said, and that's how I reacted, and then he said this, and this reminds me of this. It's kind of like, it's kind of observing the inner dialogue and also observing what's going on outside. You're going to be doing that anyway when you're triggered. So it's kind of just, maybe, broadening that a little bit. So again, just kind of summary of that, like, you're going to have like, the question of you're going to have needs around maybe safety or belonging or self-esteem or whatever. So just validate that, you can say, yeah, God, I really, really need to feel safe here. That's kind of what's coming up for me. Validate your feelings, like, yeah, gosh, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling, scared, or feeling, ashamed. You just validate that for yourself. That's very helpful. Gather information, like look around, take like even naming things that in the room or in the place you're in, reassuring yourself, saying, yeah, wow, okay, this is really heavy, and this is very intense, but I'm okay. I'm hanging in there. I'm all right. Making choices then as you go on, then you can kind of start saying, well, what are my options here? Do I want to just be quiet and kind of observe, or do I want to maybe say, okay, actually I'm going to go out, gotta make a quick call or something, just to kind of maybe take some of the intensity out of the thing, or you could look at your choices. You might want to say something or ask a question, and then you're just moving forward. So I'm coming towards the end of the webinar, and you'd probably be glad to hear that we're going to be doing the exercise soon. So I know this is quite pinky, all of this. So this is just a slide about what you can do after you immediately after feeling triggered. Again, just breathing, shaking it off, maybe go for a quick walk, or so just getting a bit more energy into the body, because it can be quite intense. Any ways that you can unwind and decompress, maybe could be, talking to somebody, kind of maybe listen to a bit of music, or I don't know, just getting out into nature. These are all really great ways to decompress if you feel like, God, that was really intense. Register that it's passing. Register like, okay, just noticing that how that intensity is going down for you, if the triggering was quite intense. And then usually it's good to rest afterwards. Maybe sit down, have a cup of tea, maybe even early night if you feel that's helpful. Almost there with the slides. This is a lovely quote, one of my favorite, from Sam Beckett. It's ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. And I think this is the message that I really like to encourage everyone to take away today, is that it's not about being perfect. We can only be human. That we don't have there's not an option to be perfect. It doesn't exist for us. And we wouldn't want to be, I don't believe. So it's about like, okay, we're going to fail. We're going to kind of get caught. We're going to get triggered. So how do we fail again and fail better? How do we learn from this? How do we look after ourselves emotionally better and better? I'd really like to encourage everyone, to kind of like take that kind of learning attitude, that curious attitude away today. If you can, to be like, okay, I'm going to get triggered. How am I going to learn from that? How am I going to look after myself better as I go forward? So one of the ways that you can do that is to practice RAIN. So we're on to the exercise now. And so this is the RAIN of self-compassion. It was developed by Tara Brach, who's a wonderful psychotherapist. She's American. She's developed a lot of practices, and she's got loads of talks on YouTube all about acceptance, self-compassion, and working with the feeling self. Because of course, when we get triggered, our feeling self gets really upset. So of course we want to be able to think clearly and, kind of be, kind of logical. But we also want to acknowledge the hurt or the upset in the feeling self, the felt self, the self that, felt the lack of safety or the threat or the anxiety or the anger or whatever. We want to honor that. So this practice, really is about honoring the feeling self and bringing some nurturance to that experience. So this little practice is going to take about 5 or 10 minutes. Just keeping an eye on the time here. So RAIN stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. So what I'm going to encourage everyone to do now is to kind of like, start to, drop more into your feeling self, because we've all been probably a lot in our head with this talk, thinking about and reflecting and remembering. So, even if you want to just look away from the screen for a moment, and just maybe even just have a little look around wherever you are in your room, and just start to drop in to your body. You're dropping down from your thinking head. You're dropping down into your body. And just start to notice your breath. Just notice like the lower half of your body where you're sitting. If you want to close your eyes, that's okay. Or you could just soften your gaze. Just let your gaze kind of gently rest on something in the distance. You don't need to do a lot here. You just need to follow my voice, and I'll guide you through the practice. But first, it's good to slow down. So this is what we were talking about in the song, just slowing down. Stop and wait and slow down. Just feel your body. Just maybe deepen your breath into your belly. Just no need to analyze this. Done a lot of thinking. Just breathe. And then just begin to just remember. You don't need to think about it as such. Just remember that time you were triggered recently. That you've thought of already, or you might want to pick a different one. Could be a moment when you're with someone else or in a group and Or you might have been somewhere out in public, or you could have been at home, wherever it was. Just remember, just bring to mind gently that experience without analyzing. Just kind of go, yeah, recognize. So R is recognize. Recognize that that was a moment when you were triggered. Can you say to yourself with words, yeah, I got caught there in a big feeling, a big reaction. And then we're going to look at the allowing of that. So A is for allow. Can you allow that? Can you allow that you were very human in that moment? Can you allow that you really just had this kind of immediate reaction to something that happened? It might have been something quite small, but you had this immediate reaction. Allow that you had like big feelings, big reaction to that situation. And you see, allow is it sort of opens a door, because allowing and accepting allows us then to investigate. Because when we allow something, we can ask questions about it. We can investigate it. So we can say to ourselves, so what happened? You know, what was the moment when I shifted into that feeling, that feeling state that was like threatened or not safe or not okay? Can you remember? Was it something that somebody said or did? Was it a memory? Was it something you saw maybe even on television? What was the moment? And can you remember the moment your body shifted into a different feeling state that felt less safe? Maybe you felt angry or frightened or just shocked, maybe numb. And can you name those emotions for yourself? Can you say to yourself, God, yeah, I felt so frustrated then. And like, yeah, I was petrified. Like I was just so worried. Whatever. Can you name those emotions for yourself and validate them? Can you say, yeah, wow, it's very human. That really frustrated me. Or that I really felt really kind of stumped there. You know, just validating those feelings. Very, very human moment. This is investigating it. And investigation then naturally leads into the question of, there must have been a need there in that moment. I needed something that I wasn't getting. I kind of expected something. You know, I kind of wanted to feel safe. I wanted to feel okay. I wanted to feel valid, or like I was important, like I was seen and understood and included. Can you admit to yourself what you needed then? Can you admit to yourself, gosh, yeah, I really wanted to feel something that I didn't feel. I wasn't getting something I needed there. And just breathe with that. Just breathe with that. Yeah, that was something I wasn't getting. And then the nurturing, then the N of rain is to kind of bring that kind of recognition to yourself, like to validate now in this moment that, you know, when you look back on that self, that you that was triggered, can you see yourself now in your mind's eye and be like, yeah, I know you needed that. Can you send that message, that feeling self? And sometimes what Tara Brach suggests is even like, you know, you might want to place a hand on your heart or on your tummy, you know, because often it's the feeling brings up a lot of, can bring up sadness actually underneath the other emotions, or there can be a feeling of longing of, now I'm really registering what I needed. And that's what really drove the reaction. So can you nurture yourself now with some kindness? This is where compassion comes in. You know, can you say to yourself, yeah, I'm really showing up for myself here. I'm really I'm really acknowledging and validating myself here that this is something that I needed, that really hurt. It was really painful when I didn't get it. And that's kind of sad. That's kind of upsetting. So of course I need to give that to myself. And can you let yourself feel that? And this might be a practice that you might want to come back to later on today or on another day. And I really encourage everyone that this doesn't have to be the finish. This could be the beginning of exploring this way of working with being triggered. This might be very new for some people, and it's a place you can come back to. It's one way of working with being triggered that many people have found very, very useful. And like most things in life, it's kind of like practice. Practice is really important. It's like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. Sometimes, it's important to acknowledge, there's a lot in there, so I might need to come back to that. So, just be very gentle with yourselves today, everyone. I just want to begin to invite you all now to start to come back to wrap this up and to, have maybe a few questions, get some feedback and some clarifications maybe from some of the participants who'd like to do that. And I'd like you all to maybe could you express some gratitude to yourselves. I'd like you to acknowledge what you've done here, the courage and the authenticity to show up here today for yourselves. You're doing this for yourselves. And as I said, this is really, really always comes back to looking after yourself, taking good care of yourself, taking better care of yourself. It's something we can all do more of, particularly at this time. So I'm going to start to hand you back now to Grania, and let's see if we have some questions.
Thanks a million, Vincent. As always, a really excellent presentation, and thank you for that. And that exercise was really good. And actually, I'm not going to dilly-dally because we've quite a few questions and it would be great to get through them all by 12 o'clock. So the first one is from Anne, and if this isn't an emotional trigger, I don't know what is. So she's wondering, is there any support that she can give to her uncle, whose wife of 60 years died after a long illness, and her uncle has also attempted suicide? So there's a lot there in that question. So is there anything useful that we can suggest to Anne? Thanks, Vincent.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, for that question. And I'm really glad you're asking it. You clearly really care about your uncle, and to lose a partner, a life partner like that is unimaginably painful. And so we can only begin to wonder how your uncle is doing and what he's going through, and particularly if he attempted to take his own life, that would be a clear signal that he's in a lot of pain, a lot of grief. So, just it'd be curious for you, Anne, to wonder about where that lands for you. How does that impact you? Does that create sort of fear for you, or is there a kind of I don't know, maybe is there some strong feelings come up for you, Anne? So maybe even to spend some time to kind of check in with yourself, to kind of honor your own worry or your own concern for your uncle and your own love for him. It's clear that you care about him, and then that can actually make you, I believe, more available to support him. Because I think when we look after our own kind of worries and concerns, that actually kind of gives us more space to then open to another person's worries and concerns. And then, just to think about it from your uncle's point of view, to maybe even just, kind of make yourself available to listen, to say, listen, I know you're going through a hard time. Do you want to talk about it? Just to give him that kind of, that space, creating a safe space for him to feel not so alone, because I'm sure he must be feeling very alone now if he's just lost his wife. And to feel that felt sense connection to you as his niece would be a beautiful gift to give to him at this time. So in a way, maybe you don't have to do that much beyond just being present to him and giving him that connection, that opportunity to feel like he's not alone and that, his feelings matter and he matters at this time.
That's great, Vincent. Thanks very much indeed for that. The next question, and it's a very good question, is about dating. So I don't have the name of the person, but they're talking about the anxiety that they would normally have around dating, which of course most of us would, but that COVID is adding an extra layer to this concern, and that this person's focus now seems to be really on being hyper focused on A, the COVID, and B, the fact that they want to date and can't. So it's like that thing about, when you can have it, you don't think about it, but when you can't have it, it becomes the focus of all your attention. So there's a lot of anxiety there around COVID, etc. So do you have any suggestions for that? And we've quite a few questions to get through, so we'll get to as many as we can. Okay.
Yeah, well, listen, thanks, for that question. Look, I mean, it sounds like, there's a real longing there to connect to somebody, and, dating is, it naturally brings up anxiety, and at a time like this, it's more tricky than ever to meet somebody in a way because of social distancing and, just the way things are at the moment. So, I'd really, encourage you to remember that, you're very human, and there's lots of single people out there. So, like you, who would like to meet somebody, and there's anxieties about like, how will that go? Will I be accepted? Will I be liked? It's so normal, and we all worry about that. And so you're very human, you're very normal, and to honor maybe the kind of the wanting or the longing or the need to connect to somebody. That's a valid need to want to meet somebody nice. I mean, who could argue with that? So maybe just be gentle with yourself, and maybe, acknowledge and validate that feeling for yourself that you'd like to meet somebody. And of course, there's anxiety around that, and just to sort of, honor that in yourself, to kind of if you could meet that anxiety and be able to say to yourself, yeah, gosh, this brings up a lot of worry for me, a lot of anxiety. And, what do I need around that? Maybe I need to, connect in with a friend, or, maybe I need to, kind of like inquire into like, what you kind of would like from somebody, from a partner. So that when you do kind of, go on a Zoom date or whatever, that kind of like, you're honoring that side of yourself too. Like, yeah, this is kind of what you've hoped for. That's very valid too.
Brilliant, Vincent. Thank you very much. Sorry, I prematurely hit the button there. Another question, again, I don't have the name. Do you have any advice on how to apologize and explain to others that you've been triggered without blaming them, or also without feeling like you're a victim? And it's really about trying to help them to understand. So that's a very good question.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Yeah, I mean, like, I think blame can just get in the way often of, moving forward with something, blaming others or blaming oneself. So I think you're absolutely right, questioner, about that, the person who's offering that question. So yeah, I mean, blame, yeah, I put that to one side, bracket that off. Taking responsibility is really what it's about. So, there's a difference between blame and responsibility. And blaming is kind of like, it's your fault, you did this on purpose, whatever. Responsibility is more like, well, I had a big response, or, I want to apologize for my initial response, which maybe wasn't so skillful. And I acknowledge that. Like, so, it sounds like, the way you reacted to something you're not so happy about. So just maybe naming it and saying, look, I know I didn't handle that well, but I want to handle it better in future. Because I care about how this relationship, or I care about how you feel about me, and I want you to know that I care about you, or, whoever you want to apologize to. And then you're saying, I want to take responsibility. I want to respond with more ability. The word responsibility is actually two words if you think about it. It's responsibility. So you're actually saying something really positive to somebody when you're saying, I'm not just saying I'm sorry about the past, but I want you, I want you to know that I want to do better in the future. I want to be more responsible, have more responsibility. So kind of have a conversation around that and what contributed to you kind of having the big reaction, maybe just to say, yeah, I just got caught by something you said or did. But now, I'd like to talk about it. So, nobody needs to be a victim here. It's just about being human, I think.
Great response. Thank you for that, Vincent. So another one in here, again, I don't have a name, but they tell me that they're a mental health nurse and they're in the process of changing jobs, and anxiety levels have increased because of that. And I think, again, and one does hear this, that because the person is a mental health nurse, that they should be less prone to anxiety than the rest of us, and that they should just get on with it. And this person is finding all of this a struggle, and working from home, and between just being at work and at home, it's just increasing her I'm assuming it's a girl, I shouldn't do that. It's increasing this person's anxiety. So the person is just looking for some tips on how to manage that on a day-to-day basis. Vincent, if you have anything you could suggest.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. And, as a fellow mental health professional, I just want to extend, sort of, I don't know, like a kind of a heartfelt, yeah, it can be very challenging to be a healthcare professional, and it can be incredibly rewarding. So as a mental health nurse, I'm sure you're getting both experiences, the reward of it and the challenge of it. I suppose one of the most important things I learned in my training was, we're not supposed to be perfect, or we're not supposed to be superhuman. Like, we, in whatever our jobs are, it doesn't even matter if we're a mental health professional or what we do. We're human, and we're going to have anxieties and insecurities, and we're going to get triggered ourselves sometimes. So it's about really taking care of yourself, I think, and honoring the anxiety and honoring the fact that you're changing job. Look, anyone who changes job, that's always going to be challenging. It's always going to bring up insecurity. So just to kind of give yourself time with that. So if you slow down with that and kind of go, you know what, I'm changing job. We're in the middle of a pandemic. This is challenging. But, if I take my time and I look after myself and I get the support I need, it'll be fine. So, where do you might you need support? Where like that need, if you think about again the word need, where would you need some support? You might want to reach out to colleagues, maybe like, can you form a little bit of a network in work, begin to form some links with people you work with, where you can be yourself, where you can kind of say, gosh, I'm a bit nervous about the new job. And you almost certainly get people saying back to you, yeah, I remember when I started here, and yeah, it took me a while to find my feet. So, maybe kind of to honor those anxieties by, saying to yourself, well, what do I need? Maybe I need to reach out for a bit of support here. And I know when I've started in new places, including MyMind, I've done that. And it's always helped. It always helps to kind of form little links with people you work with. Because other people, appreciate that too in work. It's like, oh, here's someone new and they're open to connecting. So I hope those kind of suggestions are helpful to you. And best of luck with your new job.
Great stuff. Thank you, Vincent. Annette says that she has heard it said that nearly 50% of the emotions that we are feeling aren't ours, that they are inherited from parents or others during our childhood imprinting. So how can we feel sure that the feelings we are feeling ourselves are owned by us? That's a very interesting question.
It certainly is. Thanks, Annette, for that. And, look, I couldn't agree more, really. We really do. We're sponges when we're children, and we can still be quite spongy as we get older. So like we definitely do inherit our parents' anxieties, hang-ups, the way they cope with situations, their kind of own felt sense. Shame is often intergenerational, like parents not feeling like they're okay. We often absorb that, and we kind of, it's a really good question to kind of ask yourself, what is this feeling? Is this mine, or could it belong to my mother or father or to somebody else? So that's often an inner inquiry. to kind of separate out, because, it might be kind of coming from your parent or parents or family, but you might also have your own version of it. So it might be both. It might, I know we're talking about the 50-50 thing, but often we develop our own version of it. So even just to make that kind of distinction of like, yeah, my mom was really anxious about this thing, and I absorbed some kind of version of that, but now it's something else for me. I think that's a very, very valid kind of inquiry. Because I think we kind of need to own our own emotions, and also kind of separate out and differentiate from the stuff we inherited from our families, and to kind of maybe, kind of leave some of that with them because it belongs with them.
Fantastic, Vincent. Sorry now, I'm rushing us along a bit, but we've a few more to get to before the end. So Christina is wondering how to help a client who is very much inside his or her thinking brain and struggles to get in touch with their feeling brain.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. You see, I'm kind of laughing now because I think often we're trained as therapists to kind of get our clients into their feeling brain. It's almost like, it seems like sometimes that's the goal that we're set. And I think, sometimes there's a kind of, there's something to be kind of questioned about that, because if a person's in their thinking brain, they're probably doing that as a way to cope with some very big feelings that are kind of maybe feel like they're too much or they're scary. And that's kind of what's authentic for the person, is to be more identified with their thoughts. So if you're looking at somebody who's very in their thinking brain, you might be looking at a very frightened person, or at least there might be a fear there when they start to get vulnerable with you as their therapist. So maybe I would say, I'd be inclined to honor the person where they are. So accept them where you find them. Almost like saying or conveying, you don't necessarily say maybe this to the person, but conveying like, yeah, this is who you are. This is how you've learned to cope with life. And that's valid. That's obviously kind of kept you safe, and it's got you through things. And can we begin to like very, very gently look at what's underneath the thinking? Can we very, very gently, when you're ready, and in ways like just like little bits of like, oh, do you notice how you feel about, it sounds like you feel like this, or do you notice the feeling there when you say you think this way about someone? And you're really kind of just very, very gently inviting the person to begin to explore that other side of themselves that maybe they don't kind of spend too much time in, because there's a lot of big feelings there, and maybe some of them are a bit foreign, or could even feel a bit overwhelming. So I'd really encourage, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the person's name. Is it Caroline, did you say?
Christina.
Christina. I would say, Christina, like, really, if you can honor the person where they are, and then, just very gently inviting them to kind of notice what's underneath the thoughts, and just patience, and, and being okay with it being maybe a little bit slow, because I think the person will probably really sort of respond to that. They'll really be grateful that you're hanging in there with them, because it's difficult.
Excellent. Thank you, Vincent. Faust is wondering how to deal with the situation he's found himself. The last time he got triggered, he caused a lot of distress to his family. I'm assuming Faust is a man. I probably shouldn't do that either. Said a lot of things and created what he believes is a difficult situation, apologized afterwards for the extreme things that were said, and attempted to reassure them that things were okay, and try to explain how they became triggered. And he or she is just worried now about how that affected the family. And that might be very similar to your earlier answer about blame and responsibility there. Not wishing to put words in your mouth, Vincent. We have a couple more questions to go. So,
yeah, listen, I'm really glad. Thanks, Faust, for that question, and I'm really glad that you're asking it, and well done on naming it. Because look, who among us have not lost our temper at some stage and kind of said things that we regretted? It's just, look, it's painful to look back on, and I'm really glad you're here today and you're asking it. So, I mean, like I was saying before, like when we don't feel like a need is being met, or we feel like something is threatened or something's not validated, we have symptoms, and I call them symptoms, or we have coping mechanisms, and sometimes they can be kind of not the most constructive, shall we say? So, we kind of acting out. So acting out, form of acting out is to get angry and to say angry things to other people, and often to feel remorse afterwards, which is what you're feeling. And I mean, the fact that you feel embarrassed, and it sounds like you feel embarrassed, you feel remorse, and you're apologizing, because you're trying to repair with those people what's happened. And I suppose what I'd encourage you to do there is, again, ease up on the blame, because, you had a very human moment. And, kind of, if you track back and kind of really kind of register, okay, what happened for you in that moment? Like what was the event that kind of got you angry? Was it what precisely was it? Was it something that someone said or did, or was it something that you felt very insecure about? Because if you acknowledge that and you work with that need in you, then you're going to be less vulnerable in that place in future, because you'll know it. You'll be like, okay, I know I'm insecure about whatever, something that, you feel, a bit sensitive about. And then, next time it comes up, you can see it coming a mile away. Like, okay, they're talking about this topic that I'm sensitive about. And I know I'm starting to feel anxious or angry about it. But then you can register that, and you can kind of regulate that. You can say to yourself, okay, I'm starting to feel that old reaction of anger when so and so says such and such a thing that kind of gets me upset. And then I know you're talking about the kind of making amends with your family and the people involved. So I think, kind of like forgiving yourself, and just going back into those situations, you're showing courage. And just, I want to acknowledge that, like that, it takes courage to go and say, hey, look, I think I didn't handle that well. And I want to acknowledge that, and maybe exploring interpersonally with your family, or with maybe one person in your group that you kind of are a bit closer to sit down and say, look, could I talk to you about this? And just tell you what happened from me. If you said, like, I was going along and I was already stressed that day, and then so and so said that thing, and that just gets me. I'm going to make something up here. I have no idea if this is relevant to you, Faust, but maybe someone made a comment about your job, and you're very sensitive about your job. It was an off-the-cuff remark, a joke about, say, your job, and you're just very sensitive about your job at the moment. And you could just say to that family member, or one or two people, say, like, yeah, I guess I'm really kind of sensitive about that at the moment, or that I'm always a little bit insecure about that. And just naming that with that other person. Naming is good for shaming. Shaming situations often need to be named with somebody. Like, shame is something that we often want to hide, or we want to, like, not talk about, because, shame feels shameful. It feels shameful to feel shame. It's kind of compounded that way. So picking somebody in your family or in your group that you can be a little bit more comfortable with, maybe feel a bit safer with, and just even naming the shame or the upset or the insecurity, and just, kind of allowing that to be heard. And that it's just out there as a, look, this is just a thing that I struggle with, and I'm trying to do better with it. I think, that would be a really good way to go forward with that.
Excellent. Now, I'm very conscious that we're on the time, so if people need to hop off to go on with their day, I fully understand that. But we do have a couple of other questions, and I know that Vincent and I don't mind staying on for a few extra minutes. So I just want to come in with a couple of comments first. So Marie has said something very useful, which is, I've discovered that drinking coffee can make my anxiety worse, so she needs to drink decaf instead. And I think that will, and I think a lot of people have found that out the hard way. Another comment from Declan, which I hope people will find helpful, which is that he has OCD, and with excellent support, he has been able to build up fantastic management tools, and he's doing really well. He's saying to us, which I would agree with this, recovery is a process, and he still has tricky periods, but he accepts them as being part of the process. And building emotional resilience and changing his response to triggers was a real game changer. So thank you very much for that, Declan. That's really helpful. I have a couple more here now, Vincent. Dawn is a psychiatric nurse currently out of work, and she has had numerous interviews, excellent feedback, but always rejected. And this is now impacting big time on her own mental health and her self-esteem. She feels like a failure. So if you could make a couple of suggestions there, perhaps for Dawn.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. Look, I mean, the whole area of trying to find work is really does kind of bring us into a lot of vulnerability, I think. Because we all, kind of at some point or other, we're kind of like, wanting to get involved and participate and, whatever the area of life is, and often so in the area of work, it's like, just needing to get a job creates a certain vulnerability. So, I really resonate with that anxiety that you're talking about there, particularly if there's been some rejections. And I suppose, like, I think with feeling anxiety, around job rejections, is kind of like, it's useful to kind of separate out the kind of the environmental kind of lack of responsiveness, for want of a better word, like, the environment not saying, hey, Dawn, come on, here's a job, with the kind of the response in you of the feeling rejected or feeling like unwanted. Because it's easy to forget, but like, it's actually, it's not, in one sense, in a real sense, it's not really personal when we don't get a job, even though it feels very personal. And in another way, it is personal, because we often need work, and we need to kind of bring in a wage. But it's like, we don't know who we're up against. You don't know who your competition are. And, I suppose it's just to hang in there and to keep applying, and just attend to the hurt, which you're talking about, the anxiety and the hurt of feeling rejected, as something around, how can you kind of reassure yourself? How can you show up for yourself in that felt sense of rejection or hurt, and to reassure yourself, and to, take care of yourself, to remind yourself that, you have a lot to offer, like you're a qualified psychiatric nurse. So, you've got really great skills, I'm sure, to offer. And it's just about finding a fit for that. Often the environment is slow to kind of meet our needs in that sense. So you might have to sort of hang in there for a while to find the job that's going to, fit you and meet your need for work. And in the meantime, can you meet that gap in yourself? Like, can you sort of show up for yourself while you're waiting for for the world of work to kind of, realize that you've got lots to offer.
That's
Hope
great,
that,
Vincent.
hope that helps, Dawn.
Yeah,
best of luck with your job search.
That's terrific. Thanks, Vincent.
Yeah.
So I've two or three more. So Mia is just, I suppose, experiencing what a lot of us are experiencing, and struggling with being triggered by people who are not following the rules around managing the pandemic, not wearing face masks, etc. And it's finding it hard to let go of. So she's had a couple of altercations, and she finds it hard to let go of that in her head. And what can she do to not let it disturb herself, and particularly for the length of time that she's allowing it to affect her?
Yeah, thanks, Mia, for that question. And I know a friend of mine who struggles with this a bit as well, going into shops, going to a shop and sometimes getting quite annoyed, or it's sort of experiencing that anxiety around safety. So I suppose what I'd suggest is, like, registering safety is very important for all of us. And, like, in the song The Safe Cross Code, one of the first lines is, look for a safe place. So if you can kind of register, when you are feeling safe, so let's say you're at home now and you're in a safe environment. So being able to kind of actually, like let that sink in at a feeling level. So even if you just like were to kind of, sit for a while, maybe do a little, breathing, a little bit of meditation, and just kind of saying to yourself, I'm at home, I'm safe, you know, kind of like giving your felt sense, your body and your mind time to register that. Maybe that's not registering with you deeply enough at the moment that you actually are safe when you're safe. And then when you do kind of go into a situation where you do notice that there is something happening that you feel is less safe, what can you do to make the situation more safe for yourself? So if it might be a question of, social distancing a bit more, it might be a question of, you know, when you leave that situation, just kind of, just being a little bit careful, just washing your hands. So whenever you're kind of going into those situations, just thinking about, okay, how can I make it as safe as I can? And when you feel that like that anxiety coming up, when you are in a safe place, just to remind yourself and to really like bed that into your body and your feeling self that I'm safe right now. And when you're not feeling safe, to say, right, I'm going to contain this situation as best I can, maybe, by spending less time there. You could even remove yourself from the situation. If you feel like you want to say something, of course, that's absolutely valid too. But I suppose just be aware that, we can all voice a concern around safety with somebody else, but we won't always get the response that we're looking for. We won't always get the other person's sort of meeting us where we are at in terms of our anxiety. If they're kind of like ignoring safety feature, it's quite possible that they'll have a defensive reaction. So, you might find that you might want to think twice about confronting the other person, but then, you may feel like you need to. So that's kind of a choice then. But good to have the choice, kind of maybe take a moment and say, well, do I really need to say this to this person? Will that be fruitful? Or am I better off to just, kind of create a bit of space between me and them? That might make me feel more safe. Hope that helps, Mia.
That's excellent, Vincent. One here from somebody who doesn't give us the name, but has recently lost their dad and is finding it very hard, struggling with the grief and getting on with life. And obviously that's a major emotional trigger there. So if you have any suggestions.
Yeah, well, listen, thanks for asking. And as someone who's lost people close to me, I know grief is very painful and it's also very natural. I mean, it's the most natural thing in the world you're going through right now. And I just hope you're getting support. And I hope that you're able to connect to somebody and just talk about your feelings, like talk about the loss, because I think that's so important during grief. To have a friend or family member or somebody to be able to name what you're going through, because there's a lot of emotions that need to be acknowledged and met and validated with grief, and to really respect that process. And the loss of a father is huge. Like my own father passed away a few years ago, and it took me a long time to not think about him on a daily basis. And in a way, I'm kind of glad I did, because he was so important. And so when we lose someone important, there's a kind of honoring in the person by kind of registering how much they meant to us and how much they meant to you. And at the same time, by actually giving that, kind of giving that some space and, honoring their memory, that can actually, gradually allow you to let them go. Not to forget them, but to kind of allow the kind of maybe the raw feelings to gradually subside, and they will. So trust that, in time it will get easier. It always does. It doesn't maybe seem obvious at the time, but the shock of bereavement, the sadness, the loneliness of missing the person is completely natural. So, I just want to extend my empathy and my condolences to you, and, just make sure you find support, find the support you need as well. That's very important, I think.
Thanks a million, Vincent. So we can take our last question now. And again, it's a rather poignant one. So it's from Maria, who wonders how can she deal with the feeling of guilt, which is being triggered constantly by her parents' situation. They are sick in her home country, and she feels that she is the responsible one and should be taking care of them, but she is away from them. She offers support and listening, but can't do much more than that. And also, they don't want to accept help from other people who are closer to them. So that's a big one there to deal with.
Yeah, thanks, Maria, for that question. Excuse me. Yeah, look, it sounds like you're doing everything you can right now, and I suppose I want to, sort of try and reassure you about that. From what you told me, it's really clear that you care about your parents, and I suppose guilt is kind of like it's a natural emotion when we feel like, God, should I be doing more? And I suppose maybe to check that for yourself, what more could you do? I mean, while, honoring your own needs, like, you're in a different country. So, I get that really limits what you can do, so, the guilt is a kind of maybe a question of, am I doing everything I can? So you can maybe make that more overt to yourself, kind of, even you could maybe sit down and, even maybe write a little bit about that, about journal a little bit, like, I feel like I should be doing more. So, I mean, realistically, could you do more? And if not, then maybe it's not just the guilt, but maybe there's a kind of sadness that, that you can't be there with them. So maybe there's feelings underneath the guilt that you could do with exploring. And you could use rain for that purpose as well, to kind of look to investigate underneath the guilt. Are there other feelings there of maybe, love and longing and concern? And I suppose we have to differentiate from our parents. We can't like live our parents' lives. I mean, our parents, are grown-ups. Your parents are grown-ups, and you can encourage them to, get more help and more support. But at the end of the day, they will sort of make up their own mind. So I think we have to kind of make that separation from our parents as well, to say, they're looking after themselves the way they know. And can you respect that, this is how they do it? And even though it might be hard for you, because maybe you'd like them to be getting more help or so forth, that, this is how they kind of deal with things. So not to kind of maybe take that on. We had this kind of question earlier about other people's feelings, and like how much are feelings ours and how much are they someone else's. And, like kind of making that distinction about maybe you're worried for their welfare and you want them to kind of worry more about their own. But, look after yourself, as well in this. Like, it sounds like you're doing a lot for your parents. So just take care of yourself as well.
Vincent, thank you very much indeed. I can hear you're developing a frog in your throat.
I know, I'm losing my voice. Yeah.
So thank you so much to everybody and 29 of you stayed on until the end, which is really good. And we have had some very nice positive feedback in the Q&A as well. So I think a lot of people have found it very helpful. So Maria actually has come back in there, Vincent, to say thank you for that. She has found it very helpful.
Oh, great.
So before we go for today, just to remind you that this is one of a series. So we have 2 more to go in this series. The next one is this day 2 weeks, which is February 25th. Again, it's at 11 o'clock. It's a free public event. And one of our therapists will be talking about how to manage intimate, close relationships during the pandemic, which I think we could all benefit from that. And it obviously doesn't have to be husbands or wives or whatever. It can be other family members, etc. So I must say I'm looking forward to that myself. I'd like to thank very much Vincent today for his input. I'd like to thank you all for attending. And I'm very pleased as well that we didn't have a whole lot in the way of technical difficulties. So to remind you again, this event is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel next week, early next week. So without further ado, thank you all very much for taking part. Thank you for your fantastic questions. And until the next time, stay safe, look after yourselves and look after each other. Thank you.